Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Mo aka Swedish Whiskey Girl, and today we're here with a few different Glengoynes. We're going to try Glengoyne 12, the Legacy Chapter 1, the Legacy Chapter 2, and the Cask Strength, and I think it's batch 7. So yeah, a little bit comparison of different Glengoynes. Glengoyne is of course a distillery in the Highlands, very closely located to the Lowlands. Basically, so you can walk between them, it's that close. Fairly closely located to Glasgow. I haven't been to the distillery yet, but I'd love to go one day. And Glengoyne means Valley of the Geese. You'll also see a goose on their bottle, if you ever see it. And they tend to have a bit of a sherried style of whiskey. I have tried for the last 10 minutes to memorize what all these different whiskies or different expressions are matured in, but I just can't seem to do it. I don't know if it's just because I've had a stressy week, but it just doesn't stick. So I'm gonna read out to you from my computer what they're matured in. So the 12 years old sits at 43%, and it's matured in a combination of their signature sherry wood and first fill bourbon. The legacy number 1 that we're gonna move on to is, let me see, isn't it a first fill Oloroso, I think? Yes, first fill European oak Oloroso sherry casks and refill casks. But the new legacy, the chapter 2, which was just released fairly recently, I would say, is a combination of refill and first fill bourbon casks. And then we have the cask strength, which is one third sherry cask, 2/3 refill casks, and then a little bit of bourbon cask influence as well. And can you see why it was difficult to memorize? Both the chapters, they are bottled at 48%, and the cask strength is bottled at 58.9. But I mentioned on the 12 that they're using this kind of signature sherry wood. And something not a lot of people maybe think about is that the casks go through a long process before they're made into whiskey casks. So for Glengoyne, I believe they often use a process where they have a specific bodega that they're collaborating with in Jerez. And what they do is that they source the wood from the north of Spain, which then is air dried in the sun for 3 years. And then they season these casks in Jerez with sherry for up to 3 years. So it can be up to a 6-year process before they come to Scotland to mature whiskey for about 10 or even longer years. So yeah, it's quite a long process, and I mean, before that, oak takes hundreds of years to grow. So it's quite an incredible thing, and definitely understand why a lot of people appreciate the casks, and I do think it's good to have respect for them. But we are going to start by trying the 12, which was that bourbon plus refill sherry influence, if I don't remember it wrongly. First fill bourbon and refill sherry. Or not refill sherry, this was the one that just said sherry wood and first fill bourbon. Let's start by having a look on the nose. Quite a mild nose, but it's quite dark, I would say. It's not this kind of fresh, overwhelming sherry note that comes out, but it's quite dark wood with a touch of little sherry notes. Quite a lovely nose, quite a kind of wintry, warming dram. But what I'm mostly getting is that wood plus sherry. So let's try it on the palate, Sláinte. Yeah, a little bit woody. A little bit of that kind of cinnamon spice coming through, making it a little bitter on the finish. Not too overpowering, quite an easy sipping dram, I would say. It's going to be interesting to see how these compare to the others. So we're going to move on quite quickly and then just compare them. So I will be moving on to the Legacy Chapter 1, bottled at 48%. And this is the one with the first fill Oloroso casks plus refill, which is the older version which was released, was it 1 or 2 years ago now? This one initially is a little bit fresher on the nose. Almost a bit more citrusy. It's like it has another layer to it. It's definitely a little bit, I can't speak, a little bit more oloroso. So a little bit dry and more sherry, actual sherry flavours coming through. Not sherry derived flavours, but more that kind of influence of what sherry actually tastes like, especially oloroso. It's very nutty. Sláinte. Straight away chewer on the palate. More oloroso coming through. It's this kind of nutty woodiness now. Have another sip on the 12 just to see. Twelve is definitely milder. There's more going on in the chapter 1. Definitely, if you are enjoying more of a sherry influence, I think you would probably prefer the chapter 1 out of those two. But one that I haven't tried before, so this is the first time I'm trying it, is the chapter 2, which is now a combination of refill and first fill bourbon, which I think sounds very promising. So we'll see what happens. I think technically, I'm just double checking that I remember it rightly, but the cask combination for the chapter 2 is almost a bit more similar to the 12. So even though the 12 doesn't say that it's refill sherry, so it might be a little bit of a more active sherry cask for those. But it's going to be interesting to try this one, so let's have a look on the nose. Initially this feels grassier. I'll keep the chapter 1 at hand just so we can compare. Yeah, grassier. Interesting. Chapter 2. The only thing I seem to be able to pick out at the moment is that grassiness. But on the chapter 1 is that oloroso burst that comes out. Because at first I thought, oh, maybe I've overdone it with my nose. Maybe I can't really pick out things anymore. I mean, it's getting a little bit late when I'm recording this, so... No, but the chapter 1 has this maple syrup oloroso vibe. And the chapter 2 is more grassing, like foresty. That's the main thing. Let's have a taste and see if there's anything different there. Sláinte. Yes, more happening on the palate. Strange. So the palate is more first fill bourbon, I would say. It's kind of juicy fruits coming out, a little bit of white grape, almost like a clementine. Touch of honeydew melon and apples. Then it has a touch of like a depth, like a spicy bitterness and a dry wood. It's quite robust, I would say, still. Let's have another sip on the chapter 1, just see comparatively. Chapter 1's very much oloroso, which I am starting to find more and more intriguing. The actual flavour of oloroso. I mean, sherry as its own category is very fascinating to me, so maybe I am developing in that way. Away from my beloved first fill bourbon. I mean, personally, for someone who loves first fill bourbon, I do think this is nice, but I actually prefer the chapter 1. Maybe it was one of those things that the spirit goes nicer with the oloroso and European oak. Interesting. I am going to take a sip of water before our next one, just to kind of cleanse my palate so it doesn't get overwhelmed. And let's start by having a look on the cask strength, which was the one that has, I'm so sorry guys, I can't remember anything. The 1/3 sherry, and then it has 2/3 refill casks. Doesn't say what refill casks, and then a little bit of a bourbon barrel influence. And I'm guessing when they say refill is those kind of custom sherry casks that they've reused. This one's a little bit chocolatey, like putting your nose into like a jar of dark chocolate pralines. A little bit of earthiness. Not too hot on the nose though. Let's have a sip. Stående. This one's by far the sweetest. Has a little bit of a touch of that sherry. The sherry flavour is the one that comes out the most, but it doesn't like reach out for you like the chapter 1 does in terms of being the specific sherry flavours, because that one's very much tastes like an Oloroso. This one has those more generic sherry aromas that a lot of people would recognise from a sherry influenced whiskey. I mean, not difficult to drink at this strength, I wouldn't say. Let's add a little bit of water just to see what happens. Oops. Something fell to the floor. We'll have a look at that later. See what happens. On the nose, it almost gets a bit... I mean, it definitely gets lighter. But almost a bit more banana-y. The spice kind of calms down a little bit. This one has a little bit of that bitter spice that the others also have. But I'm going to go back and compare it to the chapter 1, which seems to be my favourite. I do think the ABV balance on the 2 chapters is a little bit nicer than both the 12 and the cask strength. They're like here, and then the legacies are in the middle. And of course the legacies, chapter 1 and chapter 2, are kind of an homage to Cochrane Cartwright, who I believe in 1869 was the person who kind of brought the sherry casks to Glengoyne to then kind of be one of the staple essences of the distillery that it is today. And they're releasing quite limited releases. I'm going to have another sip on the 12. I feel like the 12 has opened up a bit more now. It's lovely easy sipping. The nose has kind of opened up a bit more. It's kind of light, easy going. The palate is a little bit more refreshing, and I could describe it as watery, but it sounds bad. I don't think it's necessarily bad that it tastes a bit more watery or like more diluted, because I think that has its time and its place and is quite refreshing in a way. And let's have a sip on the chapter 2 to see. Still that grassiness on the nose. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting to like the chapter 2 the most, but I think Glengoyne Legacy chapter 1 is my number 1 whiskey out of these 4. The Glengoyne 12 second, and what is... then it has to be the Glengoyne Legacy chapter 1, no, chapter 2, and then the cask strength, I think. for me personally, because I like the flavours that are quite light in Glengoyne 12, and I think in comparison to these others that have a little bit more going on, that was just nice and refreshing and easier to approach, which is why I appreciate it. Could be the lineup, could just be that it's a little bit different and it's bringing something that I really enjoy. The chapter 1 legacy, I'm sorry guys, I know it's difficult to get a hold of now, but I thought that was lovely. The other also flavours that came through really goes with that style of spirit, and I think the ABV balance sits nicely at 48%. The legacy chapter 2 I put in 3rd place because lovely first full bourbon flavours coming through, a slightly too spicy bitterness for me. And that's also the reason that the Glengoyne Cask strength is last, because it had this kind of generic sherry notes going on, a little bit more of that spicy bitterness. I might have wanted it just to go one direction instead of just being this kind of mellow thing, but I mean, a lot of people like that, so I'd love to hear what your favourite Glengoyne is. Please put it in the comment section here below. And of course, if you are liking this video, I'd be absolutely thrilled if you consider leaving a thumbs up and perhaps subscribing if you haven't already. And if you're looking to support the channel further, I of course have my Patreon as well. I've just updated my tiers to include some more benefits for people that support me. And of course, a massive thank you to my Patreons who are so supportive and lovely, and thank you for following me on this whiskey journey. I would of course also be absolutely over the moon if you would consider using my affiliate links the next time you're shopping with either Master Malt Whisky Exchange or the Scotch Malt Whisky Society the next time you're shopping with them. All this information is in the section here below, as well as links to my other channels if you're curious about that. But I hope you've all had an absolutely wonderful day. Sláinte Skål.